Cineboys to Cinnamon, episode 65.
65.
Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. This week, Gladiator II.
Yes.
Or Glad 2-ator.
Yeah, on screen it's just Gladiator, and then it turned into Glad 2-ator, which
brilliant.
Was, yeah, cheers for that.
Our opinion, fresh off the presses, this opinion. We literally
we
just had some lunch, but we finished seeing the film about an hour or so ago.
Yeah, which is unusual. In stark contrast to the previous episode, which it was kind of very staggered. So
we've shared a very few sort of initial thoughts. So really, we don't know what each other are going to say.
No, I know. It's all in the dark.
Yeah,
I like it. Oh.
With the film, of course, being a sequel, we will devote some time to talk about the original Gladiator, the first film.
Yep.
I believe you wanted to talk quite a bit about that, Ben, as you are a big fan.
Yep, definitely want to chat about the first Gladiator, how it relates to this one, all of that kind of stuff, and pinpoint why it holds such a special place in my heart.
But I'd say a lot of people's hearts. It's one of those movies, I think.
Definitely, I think it's definitely one of, if you were to name the sort of most influential Ridley Scott films, that would definitely be on there, I'd say. Up there with, it's not as good as Alien, but it's up there with his best, I think.
Okay, nice. Look forward to hearing your thought.
Me too.
This is Paul Mescal's first step into the world of blockbuster films.
Yes, it is.
As we sort of discussed at the tail end of the last episode, we thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk about that kind of jump from from independent to blockbuster fodder, and I think try and unpick what it is, the sort of challenges that come with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I'd say they're pretty seismic.
Oh yeah, and everyone reacts to it differently. There's a lot of examples of how actors navigate that new space, and how maybe it could be changed for the better. I don't know.
Yeah absolutely.
Yeah. Ooh, let's do it.
Questing the cinematic void. It's hot off the presses, not fresh off the presses.
Yeah, no. Although I maintain that you could use it both ways.
Yeah.
If we won't get into that.
No. The metaphor, it still stands.
Yeah.
So let's have a little chat, if you will, about the nature of the transition between independent to blockbuster cinema.
Yeah.
Because I think it is really interesting to see. In the case of Paul Mescal, who is obviously the film's star, Gladiator 2's star, he's someone that started out, with films like After Sun.
Yeah.
And is it Normal People, the TV show?
Normal People, the TV show, like All of Us Strangers.
Yeah.
I believe a smattering of other sort of very independent, Irish works as well.
So he's gone from that to this. And with that, I think, comes a series of obligations. That aren't present in the world of independent film. Definitely,
yeah. Press tours being the big one. Even the changing character, I think.
Yeah. Having to moderate yourself.
Yeah.
More.
Because you're, the press are going to be sort of all over you for a film this seismic, and for a sequel as well. Taking on the mantle set by someone who previously, because Russell Crowe he was already pretty established by the time he started Gladiator. He had a lot of script demands, apparently. He was a bit frosty on the screenplay initially, but this isn't the case with Mescal. This is definitely his first foray into all this. So, and you keep saying that he's everywhere, which is true at the moment.
He is. He's literally, even like a sort of cursory glance on social media and he pops up.
Yep.
And I think that's just really interesting because, in the world of independent cinema, you obviously will still do press tours and you'll do interviews, but I think the focus is more from people that have got more of an invested interest in film.
Yeah, yes.
So, and what I mean by that is publications that are sort of more film-centric. They're less interested in
what you got up to
celebrity
in the weekend.
And all that, and more interested in the work.
Yeah.
So, but of course, with blockbuster cinema, there is an expectation to sell yourself because blockbuster cinema has long been driven by the popularity of its stars, and that's something that started in classic Hollywood, and something that people within the sort of Hollywood machine were very aware of and began to make use of as a way to sell their product.
Yeah.
To the point where they were controlling the lives of their stars. As to the people they married, or even obscuring parts of themselves, such as their sexuality, their sort of background, their race, and that obviously. So Hollywood has a pretty long and checkered past of utilizing the celebrity and molding the celebrity to their will to maximize sort of engagement with their films.
Yeah, I don't know why this actor came into my head just then, but who's the guy that played Norman Bates? Anthony Perkins.
Yes,
he was one of them who, because he was like a huge star, and they like controlled because he was gay, but Universal were really keen to dampen that down, and there's some horrific stories that came from him later on in life. I think because he was diagnosed with AIDS, so he got very honest towards the end of his career, and he kind of revealed that he was sort of forced into relationships with women and stuff, and it's all very sad.
I mean, there's Hollywood has a whole history of forcing celebrities to rein in their sexuality and essentially a huge part of themselves.
Big time.
For the purpose of the industry. I mean, think about people like Rock Hudson. He's another a lot of actors that are perhaps heartthrobs. They would lose in the eyes of the Hollywood marketing machine. They would lose that sort of Hollywood heartthrob status if they were revealed to be gay. That is one of the most sort of tragic and heartbreaking sort of narratives that sort of permeate underneath all of the sort of success of the industry. And something that perhaps needs to be addressed more, actually.
Well, I mean, obviously that kind of dampening down, I think either it doesn't occur anymore, or if it does, it's a lot more subtly deployed. But I think that kind of controlling behaviour on the behalf of the studio does still kind of weirdly occur.
I think so. I mean, obviously, it's not like classic Hollywood in the sense that the Hollywoods literally owned the actors.
No, yeah.
So, they had that power stripped of them, after the sort of demise of the classic studio system.
Was it like sort of 70s when that was?
A bit earlier, I think. I think sort of... God!
I got it wrong.
I might be wrong, but I think it's sort of mid to late 50s,
right,
early 60s, when they started to really sort of rein that power in. Because of cinemas used to not only own the talent, but own the crew. They used to own the distribution as well, and the cinemas that would play the films.
Oh, right, yeah.
There were concerns about monopoly in the industry, so they sort of broke that up and they stopped them to be able to own people and
became a bit more of a kind of cottage industry.
It was less. They couldn't own the methods of production and distribution. Thank you. They that went to cinemas, and that's how they sort of started to come about. Because I think it was really difficult for smaller studios to break in away from the big five.
Yes.
So it's deviation slightly.
No. It all relates, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think nowadays that control is perhaps it's as you say, it's probably more subtle, less overt. It probably comes under the guise more of industry expectations that are cultivated through agents and a certain sense of culture within that is sort of enforced. Maybe obviously I'm not privy to this as I'm not a Hollywood actor. Surprise. But I do feel that there is a certain expectation, and I think that expectation has the claws sink deeper into the people that enter into the blockbuster realm. More so than they would in the independent, because fundamentally blockbuster cinema is more about making money. Obviously studios will fund independent cinema and hope they make money back on their return.
It's more of a gamble.
There's more of a gamble, and blockbusters, there's more money involved, and that typically means that there's more expectation that there's going to be a return on their investment, and that would obviously has an impact not only on the mechanics of the film, but also expectations around performance and the performers themselves.
Yeah, and character, I'd argue. As well.
Of course, yeah.
It has to be sort of simultaneously more diverse, but also less diverse at the same time. It's a very odd kind of balance to be struck, and that occurs in Gladiator 2, I think, a little bit. I think, not necessarily to the film's detriment, but there is a kind of the star power, or the newly found star power, or I think is put into play a little bit.
Yeah,
on this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting that, you know, the idea of press tours. I mean, you see it. It's quite common, I think. You know, when a film comes out and the lead actor or actors, you know, they are pushed so hard. You know, they're not just on interviews with, like, you know, film magazines or whatever. It's everything, and it becomes less about the film and as much about the celebrity.
Yeah. Completely.
True to form of the classic Hollywood model in a way.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. There's an interview with Robert Downey Jr., isn't there, where I think it was I can't remember his name. It's quite a famous journalist though. He asks him about his dad, and he's like, "What are we doing? What are you doing? We're promoting a film," and he gets really annoyed.
Yeah,
and I think, you know, from one perspective, you could maybe see that sort of reactionary behaviour as quite brash, but he's totally within his rights to be like, are we promoting a film here, or is this a scoop sort of thing?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of, I imagine what happens is, if you look at the kind of press material for Blockbuster, you get a lot more personal questions asked, and to a lesser extent, but still kind of reasonably prevalent, a lot of women probably get asked a lot of questions about their appearance and about that. And then, you know, you could argue that even the men, like I imagine Paul Mescal was getting a lot of questions about how he trained, you know, that kind of stuff, that kind of weird Heat magazine-y type, how did he beef up so much? I hate that kind of stuff. It really annoys me. I'm like, I don't care. He exercised and he ate a lot. That's probably what happened. That's what, you know, and there might have been some steroids involved. I don't know. They are three options. Like, there's no other way to do it. So, I don't know,
What I find quite interesting about that is the way in which I think it encourages the celebrity to be a lot more guarded about themselves and perhaps become almost act.
Yeah,
it's almost another kind of acting. I always think about, like, Christian Bale.
Yes,
like, he had like 3 versions of himself. Like, he was like the English bloke, the American.
Yeah,
I can't remember the other one. I think there's 3. I don't know.
Welsh. He's born in Wales.
So, like, there's this sort of, like, you know, he would. And I think a lot of actors would say that they are sort of playing a version of themselves in interviews.
Yeah.
And of course, to a less, you know, to a sort of more broader extent, we all have different versions of ourselves that we utilise in different situations.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, in this instance, it must be sort of the requirement to do so must be far more sort of, I guess, stronger, because, you know, it's so much more dependent on you to sell a part of yourself. In a way that's beneficial for your sort of career and moving forward. You know?
Yeah, completely. I mean, you're getting scrutinised from every angle. One misstep could cost you a role in a future film.
Yeah,
even if you've already been cast in it.
Yeah.
I can't give you any specific examples, but I'd be very surprised if that hasn't happened.
Well, it's interesting to me that you mentioned Robert Downey Jr., who I think is someone that can fight back against the kind of, like, prying questions, because he's like a well-established megastar. And he probably has a lot of pull in the industry as a result.
I think he does a lot of producing.
So he doesn't need to worry about his career if he sort of, like, rattles the cages of a few journalists, does he? Like,
Well,
the Hollywood elite aren't going to care, is he?
No,
Are they? So.
He's been on Joe Rogan. I think that's because, you know, if Mescal went on Joe Rogan, there'd probably be a lot of divided opinion on that.
Yeah.
But Downey Jr. can do it, no worries. Like,
well, he's just stratospheric, isn't he? You know, the Iron Man role put him back on the map in a big way, and it gave him
a rebirth.
And he's someone that knows firsthand the sort of how the sort of rapacious nature of the press can be, you know, really a real burden and damaging to the sort of welfare of of himself. His own welfare. So I mean, it's interesting, and I think with, like, new up and coming actors, it's probably harder to do that. I think you probably have to open yourself more than you would like.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there'll be a sort of Hollywood elite will be watching, because I imagine that's a big part of what they want. You know, I think, again, another thing about going into blockbuster filmmaking is that there'll be contractual obligations. You'll have to attend events, you'll have to do interviews, you'll have to do big TV interviews, you'll have to like maybe even wear certain things. I don't know, but, like, you know, there are going to be those kind of things put on your shoulders that you wouldn't have had to do if you'd stayed independent. And I'm not saying that as a criticism that, you know, that people do that. I mean, at the end of the day, I think a lot of actors know that they have to sort of play that game to get more roles in the future.
Yeah.
And blockbuster cinema tends to be a really good and often very lucrative way of doing that. But I do think it's particularly interesting if you think about the case of Marvel, for example.
Oh,
press
man.
tours for Marvel, and we've talked about this quite a lot in terms of, you know, their MO is to placate fans. You know, the fan culture that has become so dominant in mainstream blockbuster cinema, so dominant to the point that they can like make demands on the industry, and the industry quite often feels the need to sort of bend the knee to those demands.
Yeah.
And I remember when we were talking about like actual examples of actors that have incurred the wrath of this sort of fan culture that they have created.
Yep.
I remember you sort of mentioned Brie Larson.
Yeah, I did. Really recently, just sort of came into my. Well, it didn't come into my head. I did look it up. But yeah, Brie Larson's a classic example of a very independent star. A lot of different films like Short Term 12, etc. And she was she was almost an independent star.
She was an Oscar winner.
Yeah. And then she was cast as, is it Captain Marvel?
Yeah.
And I imagine that the graph of public perception just went from positive to mixed like overnight.
It's interesting. I think I think what ground a lot of people's gears were the sort of messages of feminine empowerment.
Yes, yeah,
and also ideas about sort of the kind of endorsement of the American military.
Yeah,
That's something I can understand
completely.
The sort of feminine empowerment thing is something that Marvel has very much courted in an attempt to try and, you know, I guess sort of level the playing field. And I'm not saying that with any negativity from my point of view, in terms of what the outcome might be. But I do think, as I've said a few times, that, you know, you do question the legitimacy of the reasons behind it. Are they really interested in progress, or are they more interested in sort of like doing things like that, masquerading the idea of progress to maximize profits? And it kind of, in a way, like, I think there's a very, in this sort of very, you know, the sort of divided nature of the sort of cultural space, I think a lot of people read this as sort of being forced down their throats. But then I think a lot of that came from just people that don't like the idea of feminine empowerment being sort of front and center in the film, which is ridiculous in itself.
Yeah, it is odd. I think her demeanor as well is sort of aggressively Californian, which I think rubbed a lot of people all the wrong way that maybe weren't even that sort of bothered about the feminine empowerment thing. I think to some people I know, they would say it's just her and it's her manner.
Oh right, okay, interesting.
Which
I've not really actually watched many interviews, because I don't tend to. I'm not that bothered about like those kind of interviews, so I never watch them. I'm never interested. Not that I'm not, you know, but like blockbuster press tours just do not interest me in the slightest.
No, they're all the same. Like
I'm just not interested.
Yeah, but I think with Brie, she was slightly unfortunate in the fact that, you know, if you're not from America, her accent's quite sort of strong. There's very, like I say, there's that kind of Californian inflection of like calming, and her face at its rest that isn't very smiley either. Like, she can appear quite serious. And this isn't me like criticizing her at all. I think
people will view those things, won't they?
They'll pick up on it, and including people I know, and they just kind of think she's irritating.
Well, I mean, I guess that's sort of the nature of being sort of thrust upon, you know, the entire world. If your face is everywhere, there are going to be people that are going to take issue with your mannerisms, the way you speak, the opinions you have, or even just something as simple as the way you look, which you know,
what you're dressed as, or
things you can't necessarily always help.
No,
but I guess that kind of scrutiny becomes all the more intense when you do sign up to a Marvel movie, and a Marvel movie that has, you know, the intention of spearheading ideas of feminine empowerment, which in a sort of cultural landscape like this isn't always, well, as they found out, it didn't sort of, I think it put a lot of heat on the film, and in fact, you know, is probably part of the reason why it's one of the less popular films, really. And that speaks more to the sort of cretinous nature of fandom than it does. I mean, I'm sort of very you know, you should be suspicious of these big industries like Disney. I don't think, you know, it does feel like boardroom concocted attempts to sort of come across as this sort of socially aware and progressive company. And I think that kind of cynicism should be, you aired.
Yeah.
But I personally felt that a lot of the vitriol towards that film were just people that didn't like that, but for weird reasons.
Bizarre.
The idea, because people always seem to think that like it's an attack on them. Yeah, it's ridiculous. They would think, it's like, well, there's so much culture out there for you to enjoy. If this isn't your bag,
don't watch it. Don't engage with it. You don't have to.
Yeah, and it's funny that those same people would like complain about that, and also then get annoyed when their favourite comedian gets. Their response would be, well, if you don't like it, don't watch it. And it's funny that then they watch these things and then it's such an issue, Yeah. But I found that whole thing kind of quite interesting, and I think as Hollywood is kind of has created this beast in terms of fan culture, and it's made sort of that kind of nerdy fan culture very mainstream.
Yeah.
And it's empowered them, I think, too much. And I think that film was an unfortunate casualty of that. I mean, the film itself wasn't that great anyway. I mean, it was definitely sort of coming towards the end of that era of...
It was just Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
And it had a sequel, didn't it?
Yeah, which I
Marvels.
haven't heard a great deal about.
No, exactly. It came and went big time. It lost a lot of money. The first one made money, I think. First one grossed $1 billion.
Oh, did it? Oh, fair play.
But then the second one massively did not. I think the second one grossed less than 250.
Okay.
So it's a steep drop off.
That is, that's massive.
Because obviously, I think the first one was the introduction of Larson, and then obviously the public opinion of her skewed massively.
And there was all those rumours about her not getting on with her co-stars and all that kind of stuff. And you wondered how much of that was kind of like an attempt to undermine any of the credentials that she brought to the sort of.
It felt very concocted, that whole thing. Yeah.
So strange.
Yep.
Interesting.
That's the media doing its thing.
Yes.
And if you're an actor who's willing to step up to the podium of blockbuster entertainment, I think you're going to have to maybe be ready for that, and be ready for public opinion to
shift on you seismically, and it's so dependent on you. I think we sort of talked about this before, but like if you sort of play ball, then everyone's sort of happy for you to have a voice.
Yeah.
But the moment you say something that is contrary to like the general opinion of things, that people go, stick to acting.
Yeah. Exactly. And
which I always find quite interesting.
You were mentioning specifically with regards to Mescal and his behaviour and his the way he's having to toe the line between his heritage, his recent heritage. He's an Irish actor, and being thrust onto the world stage. And a lot of people have opinions on the royal family, the British royal family, and a lot of them are positive. Fuck knows why, but they are. So maybe that's public opinion of me is going to get skewed a little bit. So what do you think? What do you think about that? And how
he's fucking more than entitled to have his opinion. He's Irish, for Christ's sake.
I know, yeah.
Why would like an Irish person be expected to have any reverence for the royal family?
Yeah,
and there's been questions about it, and it's almost like prodding him for it. And I think he's handled it with with grace, really.
Yeah, he's done it. Yeah, you were just mentioning how he sort of
navigates that, and he shouldn't be made to answer those questions. I think it's ridiculous, and it's almost as if the press are trying to find chinks in the armour. And then that's something I think you have to wear that armour. Being in the public eye as much as he is now going to be as a result of this film, I think he's going to have that armour, and then if he decides to sort of just go with it and go fuck it and double down, then I'll be fucking power to him, I'd say. But I just think that's an interesting part of it that I've noticed in a few of the small sort of snapshots of the interviews I've seen. They're trying to redirect him into sort of territory that addresses the kind of his stance on things, but it completely disregards the sort of any nuance or any of the history that's between the two countries and why he might feel that way.
Completely,
the whole point is is that it's just to sort of almost try and make like an enemy of him in the eyes of like Daily Mail readers. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, completely. It's an attempt to provoke him completely.
That happens a lot on these sort of press tours. There are going to be people who are going to try and do that. And I think, like I said before, I think you have to have your armour on and make those decisions because
he handled it really well.
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, would have thought he'd be more than inclined to go fuck themselves, but he didn't. I mean, for whatever reason, But yeah, I just find that really interesting, and I think I'd be interested to see where he goes from here, because we've spoken about Larson, but I think about someone like Robert Pattinson.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Someone that obviously cut his teeth in a relatively minor role in Harry Potter, but his sudden stratospheric rise to stardom was the Twilight films.
That's right, yeah.
Which he's since been very negative about.
He has,
in quite comical fashion, and he's managed obviously to cultivate a space away from the blockbuster realm, because he's a great actor.
He's a talented guy.
He's made some great decisions.
Yeah,
working with the Safdie brothers and Robert Eggers, and But what's interesting to me is that he's now gone back into the blockbuster realm by being Batman.
Yeah, which is a really bold choice.
So it's interesting for me that he goes from this position of, being this sort of teen heartthrob, which means that all, sort of being broad in the sense that the sort of marketing campaign was broad. But, every teenage girl's going to love you. Every teenage boy's going to hate you.
Yeah.
Most adults are going to think you're a fucking
little dweeb,
little bum balloon. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's interesting in itself. And then then there's an expectation for you to play that heartthrob, to play that role.
Yeah.
That must have been a whole different sort of ball game. It's a whole different challenge.
Oh yeah, and then I think his attempts to break out of that mould were interesting as well, because he had some unsuccessful attempts initially. There was a film called The Rover, which I've not actually seen, but I don't think it did particularly well, and I think a lot of people considered it a failed attempt on his behalf. Okay. But then, like you say, I think Good Time was the first film I saw.
I've seen The Rover.
Yeah,
is it with Guy Pearce?
I think so.
I have seen that. I can't remember it.
Yeah, it was just one of those films that didn't.
That might be more down to my shit memory than the quality of the film, though. I'm not sure.
I think the only exposure it really got was his presence in the film. And look what he's doing. He's a serious guy,
Yeah.
It's sort of like it happened with Daniel Radcliffe as well, quite a lot.
He's another one, isn't he?
Yeah. I think his results are a lot more mixed. I think he's a good actor, but I think he's
not Robert Pattinson level.
No. I think
as a performer. And I think you could argue that playing Harry Potter's probably a bit more of a strain on him.
It's got to be hard.
Don't get me wrong, Robert Pattinson, I think they probably could share a lot of the similarities and kind of the way that the sort of industry propelled them in that direction.
Yeah.
And, what they were then expected to do as a result. But no, I just think, Pattinson was very smart with his decisions, and he...
Yeah,
doesn't mean everything he's been subsequently has been like mind-blowingly good, but working, as I said, with the likes of the Safdie brothers with Good Time and Eggers with The Lighthouse.
Yeah,
not only were they great choices just on the basis of the kind of filmmakers he's working with, but also showcases his talents as an actor.
Oh yeah, and he's not afraid to portray sort of scumbags as well.
Yes,
like Good Time, he's horrible.
Yeah,
you're not meant to like him. You're not meant to find him even remotely attractive. You're meant to. You're with him on a journey, but the journey is a destructive one.
Yeah,
and he carries you through that his performance is largely, I think, one of the best things about Good Time. That and the cinematography, I think, are the reasons why that film is as intense as it is. Yeah. And I know it's under the, the assured hands of the Safdies will guide them along in that way. And they did the same thing with Sandler, but they clearly recognise kind of flourishes in actors who would otherwise not.
Well, Sandler's another one. I mean, look at fucking, Punch Drunk Love.
Oh man, yeah.
When Paul Thomas Anderson finished
Magnolia.
What next?
Yeah,
I think I've said this before.
I love
saying it because I love Paul Thomas Anderson. I love Adam Sandler, and I love this, and I love Punch Drunk Love. But he was like, I'm going to work with Adam Sandler, and everyone laughed.
Yeah.
Because the industry had built Adam Sandler in a certain mould.
Yeah.
And he breaks out of that mould in one of the most sort of wonderfully, still funny, but really vulnerable performances of his career. And, I think that's a really interesting point, that like there are some directors that offer you a way out because they see things in your performances that the mainstream Hollywood studio system does its best to obscure.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and they see that and go, no, I want that.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you think about the Safdies. Obviously, they've split and gone separate ways now.
Yeah.
Creatively speaking, he's doing that. Is it the Smasher film with Dwayne The Rock Johnson? A24.
Yeah. Benny Safdie. Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting considering The Rock has mostly been in the blockbuster realm for the majority of his career.
Yeah,
bar like Southland Tales.
Yeah, no, but
you know what I mean?
I mean, actually, Richard Kelly went on record saying he cast Southland Tales basically he wanted to showcase hidden talent. So that's why Sean William Scott's in it, and that's why
another great performance.
Sarah Michelle Gellar's in it.
Yeah,
and they're all good in that film. I mean,
but they're all people that are iconic for reasons that are far removed from the world of independent cinema.
Yeah, you got the Scorpion King, Buffy, and like the sort
of fucking
Stifler. Yeah. In a kind of like weird LA sprawling mess of a film, which I love dearly.
Yeah, I love it too. Yeah.
So yeah,
any excuse to shoehorn the discussion about that in.
Yeah,
it's interesting to see The Rock transitioning back to that. Because he's just been in so many sort of blockbuster movies. And what's interesting to me is when I talk to people, they love them.
Yeah,
they love The Rock and they love his films. And I watch them and just think, some of them are fine. I mean, I didn't necessarily mind him too much in Fast and Furious.
Yeah,
he fit into that mold and the egotistical sort of madness of that film, which is hilarious. He works in that world.
Yeah,
because despite his best interest to come across as someone that is got his feet firmly planted on the ground, he definitely doesn't.
Yeah. Oh no. His Instagram is a treasure trove, actually, of just like with like he's clearly like his publicist who does it, but he speaks so highly of shit films that he's done. Like Red One, like he's like look at his Instagram. He appears delighted by this film and like that he's made it. And despite the kind of negative reception to it, he kind of like pushes it. And I'm really curious to see how he does that with Benny Safdie's film. Like, should it be critically acclaimed, which I expect it might be.
I mean, I think despite my sort of suspicions around The Rock, I do think he has a good performance in him.
Oh yeah,
and I think this could be a really good opportunity for him to showcase that. I think, he's very clear in the sense that a lot of his decisions about the films he takes on, it's very much like about the brand, the Rock brand, and I think this for him is like the way to show the artistry amongst all the CGI sort of bollocks. You know what I mean? Like, it's interesting when you talk about the Red One.
Yeah.
He talked about how he went and sat and watched Oppenheimer.
Yes.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
And again, Oppenheimer, I mean, I really liked it when I first saw it, but as I muse on it, I have sort of problems with it. It's not a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
And, we speak a lot about how Nolan walks an awkward line in sort of, certainly within mainstream Hollywood.
Yeah.
But, he went to see that film and he said he sat in Nolan's seat on the where he watched Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
and he thought, God, I'll tell you what, Red One would look great.
I know.
And I just thought, fucking hell, that is a bold, sort of link.
It's just
a sort of throwaway, naff-looking Christmas film.
Yeah.
And a film that does have, in a lot of people's eyes, quite a lot of prestige in Oppenheimer.
Yeah, and it's just like such a strange thing to say, but
and only he could do that.
I know, yeah.
And you're right in that sense.
Brash, and his Instagram is just like holy. It's almost, it can appear deluded, but I think it's calculated and intentional for sure.
Oh, for sure. And he has like just a cabal of fanatical followers. I think would follow him off a cliff. So
100%. Yeah.
I mean, don't be wrong. For me, he used to be one of my childhood heroes. Do you know what I mean? And there's a part of me that still wants to enjoy his films, but I just find it increasingly more difficult just when you hear backstory things and obviously no one's infallible, but just the idea that they have some actors, it's harder to see them as sort of real people. He's one of them because he's had to play this role throughout since his sort of ascension to the top of the Hollywood pile. It's interesting in his case.
I always think Ewan McGregor's a really interesting example of this, right? Because he went on record in the late 90s by saying he never wanted to be in a blockbuster, and he was quite a sort of advocate for the sort of independent. I mean, it was a lot different in the 90s, but he wanted to remain in these sort of little films, and he was like, I never want to move to America, I never want to do anything that costs beyond sort of 10 million quid. And then he was in the Phantom Menace.
Yeah, that is a fucking jump, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's a quote from him going, "Oh yeah, but this is Star Wars." So I think that maybe speaks to Star Wars' influence, from a cultural point of view. He's like,
I mean, at that point, it was still a very, very sacred, not just as a sort of as a piece of sort of sci-fi culture dripping in the sperm of its undying fandom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it is now.
It's a really good way of putting it.
But, like, back then it had a sort of cinematic... I mean, it still sort of has that. The original trilogy is viewed separate from just being a sci-fi film. I think it's still seen as like a landmark film.
Oh, yeah. It changed everything.
Technology.
Changed visual effects.
Yeah, exactly. I could sort of see his point in that regard.
Yeah.
I wonder what he thought about that in that context when he met Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting watching that.
But take me back to Scotland.
Yeah, but since then he's been more open to it, and also there's something strange about him in that he's actually been in a lot of shit films.
He's in a lot of shite.
But people hold him in like very high esteem, and he continues to find work. He continues to find lead roles. He was in the Shining sequel. He was in.
He was in the Fargo series.
He was in the Fargo series. Good. Yeah. And I think he's sort of a weird example of it. An actor who's impervious to box office duds.
Yeah.
It's really rare for that to happen. And I think, if you commit to that blockbuster lifestyle...
Because so many people fail. You think about like Liam Neeson.
Yeah, exactly.
He went from being like a pretty good actor with a good, a pretty credible back catalogue of solid films behind him.
Yeah, Schindler's List.
Yeah, exactly. Into the world of action cinema, which I'm not critiquing him for. I quite like it when actors make a shift.
Yeah.
But that has sort of put him in bargain bin territory, or definitely on the periphery of bargain bin territory for quite some time.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work for everyone.
No, it doesn't. And it can shape a lot of people's opinion on you. But Ewan McGregor, for some reason, and I think it speaks to his charm off screen. I think he is unafraid to go on talk shows and speak quite openly about his experiences, speak quite openly about his relationship with Mary Elizabeth Winstead, how he got divorced and that kind of stuff. And he's sort of very charming, and he has that sort of, it might be an act, but he's very natural with press tours, and I think he's quite good at it. And
so there's something to be said there about the way he can conduct it, almost.
Yeah. He can remain Hollywood golden boy even when he makes a film that makes less than $1 million at the box office.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And he's directed one, and that happened to him as well. But he's still, he's still finding work, and I just find it fascinating.
Well, the Star Wars thing has sort of kept him quite relevant because he was in the Star Wars series, wasn't he?
Yeah, and a lot of people, a lot of people found his performance as Obi-Wan to be, worthy of the Alec Guinness original. A lot of people like him in that role. I quite like him in that role.
Yeah, I don't think he's the worst. I mean, I've got a bit of a soft spot for that trilogy that he's in. So,
me too.
Childhood, obviously, but
I
I think he's probably one of the stronger things about that, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
About it. I mean, I really think about that era of Star Wars very often, but
he's cast opposite Hayden Christensen, who I think struggled a lot more.
Yeah.
So
although ironically enough, a lot of people said he redeemed himself in the Obi-Wan series. I don't watch TV shows really, so I don't know, but particularly Star Wars ones.
Yeah, I would say I can understand that.
Did you? Yeah, because you've seen it, right?
I've seen it.
Sorry, I should have asked.
No. I mean, I just love that. Like you say, I love that original trilogy. So it was one of the rare examples of me going, no, I will watch a Star Wars TV show. Yeah, it was fine, but he was good in it. I wouldn't ever see it again. It just, these kinds of things just look a bit plasticky.
Yeah, with you.
And there's no grit to them. There we go. Yeah, Ewan McGregor. I just needed to mention him because I find his career trajectory really interesting and how he's handled it with regards to what we're discussing about the transition between, independent cinema and blockbuster. He's never really found his way back, but
no, I do think it's interesting that there is a sort of a slowly increasing percentage of directors who, are at least framed as these kind of individuals that can make films that have got a bit more between the ears with a sizable budget. Yeah. We talk about Robert Pattinson and we see is it Mickey 17?
Oh yes,
Bong Joon-ho. Yeah. So Hollywood is obviously the success of Parasite and him winning the Oscar, being the first non-English language film to win Best Picture.
Yes.
I think it was always going to happen where Hollywood were going to go, give him loads of money.
Yeah.
Fine, because I really liked Parasite and I really hope this film's good because I really, really like Bong Joon-ho a lot. I think in interviews, and he just seems like such a lovely bloke.
He's no stranger to directing American Hollywood actors.
Exactly.
Chris
Yeah.
Evans,
Snowpiercer.
Yeah. So I think I'm curious about that. Is this blank check film? So
yeah, exactly. And I hope it works out.
Me too.
But it's interesting that maybe these kind of direct actors like Paul Mescal, who, I was thinking like about the trajectory of where he goes next. Maybe that'll be his next choice. If he stays in blockbuster fodder, is he going to go for the kind of like Christopher Nolans of the film world? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of hope he does. If he does stay in blockbusters,
or is he going to go back to independent? Is this him dipping his toes into it? I don't know.
Yeah,
he's got more than one. As far as I'm aware, he has all 10 toes.
Yeah.
Paul, if you could call up, I'm going to start a rumour. He only has 9 toes.
Yeah.
That's what you get for not liking the Queen.
Mescal. I mean, as far as I'm aware, he's not been cast in anything else as of yet, or if he has, it's been kept under wraps. But yeah, I kind of part of me wishes or hopes he does go back a little bit, because I really enjoyed his performance in All of Us Strangers. I think that sort of cemented for me his power. He's
a phenomenal talent, man. I mean,
really good. Yeah,
After Sun still for me is one of the
that lingers in my mind.
I mean, it's just one of the few. I mean, obviously we go to cinema a lot. We watch a lot of films. There's lots of modern films I love.
Yeah,
but there's that film that set itself for me the same way Under the Skin set itself aside for me. That there's just something incredibly special about that film.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was watching Mescal throughout Gladiator thinking, God, it's so strange that you're playing this way, and quite well. You could definitely do Hollywood leading man, Paul.
Yeah.
But his performance in After Sun is one of the great performances, I think, of the last 20 years. I just think it's, stunning. And
really
it gives me sort of goosebumps thinking about it. It's just one of those films. Do you know what I mean? It's a journey,
oh my God, yeah. I mean, it was one of the first things we covered.
Actually. Yeah.
But it has never, and it lingers in my mind. This the back of my mind is just this artifact of very raw, kind of emotional power. This sort of performance that he does, that's really quite
and a power that resides in the stuff that he hides away from people.
Yeah.
It's in there. That's one of the great beauties of his performance in After Sun, is that he's hiding stuff from his daughter, but in the hiding you see so much more.
Yes,
he's so much more naked than he thinks he is.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's it'd be interesting to see. I'd like him to go back into there. So if we're making demands,
Charlotte Wells again. Yeah.
Well, fucking hell yeah.
That would make me really excited, actually, if they announced that.
I'd be like,
I'm all in. And I'd probably, I'd expect less than After Sun, and probably still be very, very satisfied.
Yeah. But I think there's a chance he might stick around. But he's been very explicit in saying he won't work with Marvel films.
Okay, yeah.
I think anyway. I'm pretty sure I've heard that. I might have just made that up, but
I can understand that. He, I can imagine he probably isn't that huge of a fan. He probably is quite unconcerned with that whole world. I mean, it is probably if you're going to choose a property to launch yourself into this realm, I think Gladiator is probably a reasonably safe way to do that, compared to
it's not going to damage your credentials a huge amount, is there? Because there's enough reverence for the original. It is a legacy sequel, really.
Yeah, big time.
But I think it's not. No one's going to look at you and go say, "This, you've sold out."
No, I don't think so.
Not in the same way they would if you went to Marvel.
No, yeah.
Especially after saying that you wouldn't.
I'd struggle to cast him in a Marvel film. I mean, I don't know that much about the source material, so I don't know.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't surprise him if they rang him or rang his agent.
Oh, I definitely think they would have tried.
Yeah. It's Kevin here. Hello.
Fancy playing
Captain Phasmatrastic the second? I don't know.
Yes.
I'll do it. How much?
Yeah.
£10,000. Amazing. That's loads of money.
God. Mum, I've made it.
Yeah. I can move out. I can put a deposit down on that.
Shut up down there, Paul. I admire him for doing that. And not that I sort of pour scorn on actors that do. I think there's an allure to playing a superhero. I do think it had a lot more weight 20 years ago to play a superhero than it does now. And again, I'm not really that au fait with superheroes these days. I'm not interested, really.
No.
But I kind of respect people that go against the grain.
Yeah.
Which in itself can become a marketing trait. I mean, you just never win. But I'm happy that he's going to stay the course from that, hopefully.
Yeah, me too.
And I'd like to see him return, but I just think that he's the perfect kind of pick for your Nolans of this world, or your Villeneuves. You know, he's the guy that you would go to. They're two examples of the guys you'd go to if you're in this sort of space. You've worked with Ridley Scott. Okay, modern Ridley Scott. You know, the jury's out on that one. Yeah. But you know, you're still working with one of the great.
Yeah, the guy who made Alien. Right?
Yeah, Blade Runner. You know, like exactly, fucking hell, like that's pretty good on your CV.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about Gladiator then, Ben?
Okay. Yeah.
You know, you've mentioned this a lot on the podcast, and I love listening to you talk about the things that you love. I could just do that forever.
Yeah.
What is it about this film? Because I think we sort of alluded to in the intro, and I think you're right to say that it is a film that has anchored itself deeply in the hearts of lots of people.
Yeah.
And it's not just a generational thing either, I don't think.
No. Oh God, no. I think it's seismic. It's got an influence, and it was a brief but welcome return to that sort of swords and sandals thing, which had long before been considered a way of losing money in Hollywood, and it was like signalled the end, brief end, but the end of that sort of way of thinking. I think because it was 2000, right? So, and I think it was a film that you could show people who hadn't seen it, that maybe were perhaps too young to watch it when it first came out, because I was 6, so I was far too young to watch it.
When did it come out? What year?
The year 2000.
Sorry, you didn't.
That's
say
right.
that.
No, yeah.
Year 2000. Okay. Yeah. But I remember my dad talking to me about it.
Okay. Yeah. So there you go. It had a kind of sphere of influence that was lasting, and I was blown away by it. It was one of the first films I remember the main character dying at the end. Spoilers. That joke's always funny.
Never worry. Yeah, we'll keep doing it.
I remember the soundtrack being really, really, really popular, and for good reason. It's a really good soundtrack. The melodies in that, I know Hans Zimmer gets a lot of shit these days for being for using underlings to compose his films. And for good reason, but I think in this instance, his work's just extraordinary, and it really permeated. And the kind of the battles, the songs in the battles are rousing, and you can kind of hum them. All of the melodies are really, they're kind of earworms. It just kind of contributed to this sort of sense of epicness. I think it was one of the first sort of epics I remember really getting on board with.
Yeah.
And there's something they do about, and it's really what I really found interesting about it. I think Maximus as a character doesn't really have an arc. He has a philosophy that remains stable throughout the film. He doesn't really change his tune he's sort of impervious to influence, and that's what makes him so noble. And he's a really noble character, and I think a lot of people...
his father is Marcus Aurelius, right?
Or
was it?
No.
That's Paul Mescal's grandfather.
Yes. So I suppose...
Isn't he sort of the purveyor of Stoicism? So it sort of makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's definitely... I mean, Maximus is very charmed by Marcus Aurelius. I know in reality Marcus Aurelius is a sort of more of a kind of controversial figure, but in the world of Gladiator, he was a very kind of almost Dumbledore-esque... I mean, played by the same fucking actor for a start. He had this kind of wisdom about him which was absolute, and that was sort of the role he played in Gladiator. And his footprint is all over the sequel as well, actually, which we'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, you're probably right, actually. I think Maximus is very influenced by that kind of stoicism and that kind of resolve. And yeah, he doesn't have an arc. It's strange, and that's what I kind of like about him, is he's sort of determined for a cause, and that's sort of it. And yeah, I think that maybe subconsciously influenced my opinion on Gladiator, and probably I have a problem with it in the sense that I get very passionate about it even though I can recognise it's not a perfect film. I do struggle with that kind of nostalgic thing that we talked about a lot in the past.
Yeah, of
just being sort of by its side regardless, and I'll kind of defend it. I'll die on a hill really with that.
Yeah, but I think that's nice though. I mean, I'm never really subscribed to the idea of like saying, well, nothing's perfect. It's like, well, there's stuff that's perfect to you. You know what I mean? I've always kind of quite sort of preferred that belief.
Yeah,
and I think sometimes it won't just be like, the sort of way that you would approach a film in a critical sense. Sometimes it is just the emotional connection.
Oh man,
and I think that film, obviously for you, and I know quite a few other people, it's similar for that reason.
He's like Maximus. His goal is very straightforward, and it's to go back to his wife and child, and that remains even when they get crucified. And I think there's something very upsetting about watching a man who sort of, I mean, in the context of Gladiator, there is sort of a semi-afterlife. There's this Elysium, but it's very sad watching, and I think that's why it worked so well for me. Is there's an emotional through line to the first film, which is very anchored by Russell Crowe's performance, which is quite still. Like, again, that speaks to that stoicism thing, but like he never really gets upset, but you can tell he's always thinking about his wife and boy.
Yeah,
and it's very nice.
Waking life is torture, basically.
Exactly, yeah, and it's completely, that's exactly right. And again, that's helped by the soundtrack, which gets very emotional at times, and there's like a backdrop of Rome, and the kind of there's a political edge to it, which I think is the weakest part of the first Gladiator film. But that doesn't matter, because it's all about Maximus. It's all about his journey, and he kind of weirdly gets what he wants at the end of it, and also Joaquin Phoenix is very good as well. He's kind of a bit of a brat in it. He's a kind of entitled, I don't know, like he expects a lot from other people, and then the fact that he's emperor is just like, you really hate him. Interesting production as well. Really. The way it got made, it was sort of from a visual effects standpoint, it was sort of one of the first to employ visual effects in an invisible way. There's a lot more than you think in Gladiator. I think it looks very good as well, and it stands the test of time mostly. There's a few shaky moments in it, but I will say no more because I've talked for about 10 minutes on Gladiator.
I mean, it is a proper epic, isn't it? I mean, it is reminiscent of like the Ben-Hurs, the Cleopatras of that, because for a time the epic was the big seller, and then that sort of changed. As all things do in Hollywood, the sort of the dominant genre changes sort of periodically, and it was interesting that in that period in 2000, that was the film that. Yeah, it returned. That was the return of that kind of idea of the swords and sandals epic, and it maybe in a way sort of paved the way for epics more broadly. Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I think it definitely would have.
Just a sort of an off the cuff feeling that I can't sort of legitimize with any prior knowledge, but. I feel that Lord of the Rings Fellowship came out a year later, right? So
2001.
So obviously it was definitely in production when it happened, but this sort of just the shift to like a sort of epic kind of filmmaking, sort of expansive, battle sequences,
$200 million.
It just seems that period of time was like. Perfect for it.
Yeah, I do think so.
And I like the film. I mean, I've not seen it for a very long time, but I remember, enjoying it. I like it. It's just a solid bit of blockbuster cinema for me, and I think that era of Ridley Scott was quite good at that.
It's a straightforward story, and it has just a lovely soundtrack. And the quieter moments of the soundtrack really, really, really resonated with me. I owned it on CD. I now have it downloaded on Spotify, and there's you can sort of work to it. You can kind of put it on in the background. It's one of those you work and it's in the background, like you're writing an essay or whatever. I haven't wrote an essay for fucking years, but it's entered the canon, I think, and it will remain there for a while. And I think it's well, it's all over streaming at the moment, probably because of
I
the
noticed on
sequel.
ITVX it was on there.
Yeah.
Again, it's just building up the buzz, aren't they?
Yeah,
for this film, because they're pushing it hard.
Big marketing campaign.
Yeah, huge. I mean, obviously, Mescal's everywhere, but the film itself is everywhere.
But there's been a recently, up until quite recently, that I think there's been a pushback on the amount of expenditure that can happen with marketing because of the failure of a lot of blockbusters in recent times, and I think a way to save money is by pushing back the marketing.
Okay,
because you can rely on viral marketing a lot more than you.
Well,
could.
I mean, I guess social media is arguably a cheaper way to market your film than like posters on buses. And
I was just about to say bus posters, but Gladiator seems to be a kind of return to that traditional marketing. I think Paramount really are pushing it, and it's working. It's made a lot of money already, I think.
I think it was always going to. The critical consensus is quite divided on the film. I think a lot of people really taken to it, and a lot of people aren't. There doesn't seem to be like a middle ground. Although I'm about to say, now we're going to discuss the film, I kind of occupy that middle ground after coming out of seeing it. So I'm going to sort of contradict myself somewhat.
No, but I it's polarized people.
I found it. I mean, I sort of was going into it. We have a very well documented. I think it's fair to include you in this, Ben. Sort of very well documented suspicion that we level towards legacy cinema. But I think there's also willingness to admit that when it's like a franchise or a film that you care about, there's you are going to be a little bit more. I'm the same.
I'm more cautiously optimistic. I think I do allow myself to get enveloped by it because of my love. It is, isn't it? And that's there, and it's fucking smart. Of people who market
begrudgingly
these films.
Admit that.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, you're like, you know what, you got me, and I'm gonna go watch it. And it's I can't avoid it. Same's gonna happen with me for 28 years later. It just is. I'm gonna let myself get enveloped by that marketing and by that. Probably going to try and see it opening weekend. Maybe I'll stop before camping outside of a cinema because I'm 30. But you know what I mean. I think it's fine for me to admit that although I am like largely quite suspicious of the legacy thing, and I think it is quite irritating. I just will let it wash over me
because this is a legacy film.
I actually, after seeing it, I think it's more a legacy film than I thought it was going to be. And I have mixed feelings on how that was deployed. I think sometimes it worked really well for me, and sometimes I thought, you've just lifted that line from the first screenplay, haven't you?
That's the thing that bothered me more. I mean, let's sort of go into the film now, I guess. I mean, but I sort of felt that there's a way to do it tastefully, and I think there were moments in the sort of opening 20 minutes, half an hour, I thought, okay,
same.
This is all right. I can tolerate that.
He's got the grain. He's got the grain in his hands.
I liked that.
I liked that.
But it got to a point where the lifting of limes, the lifting of limes. A lot of cultivation of limes in this film. It's a subplot that the marketing campaign has obscured. Because they know it would, it would. Pack cinemas.
It's more than you might think. Let's just put it that way.
Or maybe turn people away. The anti-lime thing. There were the lifting of lines verbatim from the original. I had a real problem with that with Alien Romulus, and I don't think it was as bad as it was in Romulus, because Romulus did that thing where it paused after the line to allow the audience members to go, oh my god, it's like Alien. Or like Aliens, before sort of like retreating back into some sort of nostalgic stasis, I don't think it's as bad as Romulus for it, but it did sort of still grate on me quite a bit, actually.
I'm divided, because there was a couple of times where I thought it was sort of weirdly justified. Like, there's a bit where Connie Nielsen's character says, what we do in life echoes in eternity. Thought that was kind of, because I think in the first film when he says that, it would have been maybe copied, because like he's sort of a celebrity in the first film for a bit, and I was like, oh, okay, well that would maybe be etched above his grave. I like that, so that makes sense in the context of the story. But there's a lot of like strength and honor and stuff. Don't fucking know, like you don't need to say it again. It's fine, leave it alone. And there's a few instances of that where I kind of, even for me and my kind of giddiness surrounding the first film, I was like, I don't need to be reminded of that line again. Like I remember it. I think it's fine to leave it out, and it's fine for it to just exist in the first film. But that. Who knows? Maybe a lot of people liked that. I think it's a big seller. Yeah, There's a reason why the industry keep doing it. Yeah. I love the bit where he said strength and honor. He said that's from the first film.
I couldn't believe it. I didn't see it coming. Scott.
Sorry, go on.
No, Scott and Scarpa teaming up again. Scarpa, of course, wrote Napoleon.
Yes.
Seems like it's, as a duo, it's their sort of calling card is to give a period of history a sort of cartoonish lick of paint.
Yeah.
Again, we said this in our Napoleon episode of, I've already seen like a lot of real history buffs that have gone to watch the film and have like poured scorn on its historical inaccuracies. They are
numerous,
and that's that's being kind.
Yeah.
But I don't know why you would expect a Ridley Scott film to have any basis of historical realism. In all of his sort of more historically orientated films, the history is foundational.
Yeah.
And then Scott will put his own spin on that history, which in a way I kind of admire and I kind of like. Is just fucking borderline ridiculous. Well, it is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's almost stupid how much he sort of takes the piss.
Yeah. He doesn't give a shit, does he?
No, he really doesn't give a shit.
He's got on record saying he doesn't give a shit as well. Give a shit.
Yeah. And it's funny that people still get... I mean, I get it if you're sort of passionate about history and, this is one of the few ways in which people are probably going to like expose themselves to like a certain period of history, like the Roman history, the Roman period. Then I can imagine that from that point of view, it would be quite frustrating because you'd want it to be done faithfully. Yeah. But even still, don't look to Ridley Scott for that.
No.
Particularly in his collaborations with, is it David Scarpa?
It is David Scarpa.
Yeah. So he obviously wrote Napoleon, and one thing that strikes me about Scarpa's writing style is that it isn't. Not only is it not particularly concerned with historical accuracy, it's not really concerned with lingering on things for too long. That was one of my sort of one of the things I found quite frustrating about the film, and it's very similar to Napoleon in the sense, although arguably Napoleon covers a far larger period of history in terms of years than Gladiator II does. But
it's like a week in Gladiator II, isn't
it? But like he really doesn't like to linger. He likes to move very quickly through the motions. And I don't think that he gives this film a lot of emotional punch. I didn't personally feel this film had a lot of wallop in it.
The only time where I felt like it did was the musical cues that were the first film. And there's a bit at the end which I admired, but I also can imagine why people would find it insufferable. Where he kind of goes into the Colosseum. The Lisa Gerrard hands him a song, starts from the and then he liked, and big spoilers by the way. Maybe skip ahead if you haven't seen the film. He picks up some dirt and he says like, "Speak to me, Father." I liked that, but it's because of the musical cues. It's not because of Scarpa's writing, and I think Scarpa's very keen to move on to the next thing, and not he's not. I think he thinks he's being efficient, but actually I think. That is a bit of a troublesome way of doing it, in my opinion. Yeah,
I mean, I think he's quite good at dialogue in the sense that, but not in the way that it serves the film in a way that's sort of meaningful. I think he's good at like making things snappy.
Yeah,
and it's sort of in a Sorkin-esque style.
Yeah,
in the way that Sorkin's like very snappy with his dialogue.
Yeah, it's not a page a minute. It's a page of 20 seconds.
Yeah, everything's very like quick and moved. I don't know. I just didn't feel like the film. I mean, it's Sorkin-esque light, possibly. Probably a better way to say it. I don't know. Not to be too harsh about Scarpa, but like I just feel like for a film, because the original film has that wallop in it.
Yes, it does.
And I know it probably relies as much on that sort of like performance from Crow. And I did think that Mescal was pretty good in this film. And I thought, most of the supporting cast were, fine.
Yeah.
But, like they were really digging around for scraps of sort of emotional worth in this script, I thought. And they did well with what scraps there were.
Yeah.
But I just, one of my biggest issues, I think it boils down to one of the central conflicts of the film, is that Mescal's character is driven by rage.
Yes.
So a rage against the Roman Empire, which is this sort of all-consuming, in his view, an all-consuming sickness on the world. It's greed, it's sort of insatiable appetite for power, and the way it spreads itself and takes everything, and leaves nothing but sort of trauma and destruction in its wake. And Mescal's character is, a survivor of a battle that happens right at the start of the film, and his beloved wife is killed in the midst of battle, and that sort of fuels his quest for vengeance.
Yeah,
that drives him, that almost gives him like a sort of superhuman strength and resilience in the face of the challenges that the Colosseum throws in his direction.
Yeah, much like the first film.
Yeah, much like the first one, exactly.
Yeah.
But then there's a bit in the film where him and Pascal square off, and then it kind of like just ends, and they kind of like, and then Mescal kind of goes back, goes, actually you seem like quite an alright bloke, actually.
Really quickly,
and it's just so snappy. I mean, I'm not saying that as a narrative sort of device that kind of couldn't have worked. I think it could have if you'd just given it more time.
Completely, yeah.
But like the fact that you just go from like the primary motivator for Mescal's character is rage.
Yeah.
And it's explicit in the screenplay. Explicit in Mescal's performance.
Yeah, and in Denzel Washington's lines.
Yeah, exactly. yeah. So, it feels like that's it. And then for it to suddenly just peter out immediately.
His entire motivation swaps places with another thing, and you're expected to go along with that, and I struggled to. His motivations in the last third of this act of this film are confusing and a bit wet, I thought.
It just doesn't have any more, because obviously you sort of guess pretty much straight away that he's going to be the son of Russell Crowe's character.
It's in the trailer, so they fucking ruined it.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
They spent far too much time setting that up in the film, because I knew already. It was ruined for me, and that is annoying. I really wish they hadn't.
Bullshit, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's another way of saying to everyone, there is another film. Remember that one? This is another. It's like, fuck me.
And it relates to the other one.
Remember, guys?
There's a familial connection here. And that's why I like what Rian Johnson did with The Last Jedi. But anyway, that's another thing.
I agree. I know you. But like, he goes from being this sort of this outcast who looks in on the Roman Empire with disgust and hatred, partially as a way perhaps to conceal his own sort of internal trauma about being sort of rejected by it or ejected from it. And then he goes to almost becoming like its chosen son and sort of leader, like so quickly. It's like none of these things have time. I mean, I know you're up against it with the running time, and you're probably never going to do it in a way that's going to be sufficient enough to. But the fact there's not even an acknowledgement of it.
No,
there's literally like a couple of lines of dialogue, and then all of a sudden, Paul Mescal's sort of rage-filled countenance changes to one of sort of warmth and acceptance. And it's like, well, given that the fucking first 2/3 of this film have all been about his anger, to suddenly just do away with that so quickly.
Yeah.
It speaks to his writing style, I think, and it was very noticeable in Napoleon, but it's also, I'd argue, perhaps even more so here, because the emotional stakes are higher here.
Oh, yeah.
In Gladiator II.
I think... there's another example of it in the way it treats the death of his wife, because in the first film, a lot of time is spent devoted to Russell Crowe talking about how much he wants to go home, and so it allows you as an audience member to kind of really get on board with that and really yearn for him to be happy and be reunited with his family members. And that's why it's such a horrible realization when they are discovered dead. But in this one, it's just like, she's here, they're in love, and she's been shot. And that's it.
There's a bit where he pushes a chicken aggressively. She tells him off. They kiss.
All good.
Oh, hang on, the Romans are coming.
Yeah.
And then and then the Romans are there, and then there's a brief battle. She dies.
Yeah,
I quite like that she died in quite a sort of like throwaway manner. I thought that was quite cool.
He did that in Robin Hood as well.
Oh, God.
With King Harold's death, it's just like he's at the top of a castle, gets shot in the eye and falls, and that's it.
Yeah,
it's the same
I quite
thing.
like that.
Yeah.
Everything just feels so quick, so snappy, and I don't know. Like, I just think that the previous film, I guess it doesn't move around quite as much as this one does.
No, different screenwriter, simpler story, allows time for you as an audience member to digest what's happened,
settle into the rhythm of it, and
that's
to really,
that's not to say that the first film isn't exciting and not filled with sort of real action stakes, but it just has that time, like you say, to contemplate. Then this one doesn't, unfortunately. I think one of the strengths of this film is the action sequences and physicality. I don't know what you think about this, but I did think that there was a real sense of peril when the battles were happening. Like, even though you sort of know Mescal's character Lucius is going to survive, you do feel like he's in danger, and you also do feel like he's not invincible either. Yeah. Like, there are moments where he gets really quite injured in it, and they let that aspect of it breathe. Just on the flip side, to kind of give it some credit where credit's due.
I thought the scope is, with Ridley Scott, you're always going to get that kind of scope, I think, and it's going to be well done. I felt that perhaps actually thinking about it when I came out, I thought that the lack of finesse hurt the film, but hearing it in that context, in terms of the action, actually, that works. Yeah, I'll reverse that.
It's something where I think a lot of more recent blockbusters are quite guilty of, isn't in there just being like no real sense of injury and a sense that a character is very much invincible. And they do it a lot with where like the villain throws the main character around as opposed to just stabbing them. As you would if you wanted to kill someone. You're not going to fuck around, are you? But they get thrown around all the time, and this film wasn't guilty of that, and I liked that about it. Like, I think partially because a lot of the villains in the film are animals. There's a lot of sequences in the Colosseum which are not Gladiator on Gladiator.
No,
there's sharks, there are rhinos and baboons.
I liked the baboon bit.
That was really cool.
The effects were pretty good. I mean, you could still tell.
They're very well rendered, though. They look the texture on their skin is very good.
That was quite cool. I liked that scene.
Quick technical note, actually, I do want to touch on this because I found it's something that I don't think a lot of people really give a shit about. But there's a technique called frame interpolation. It's basically when you want to slow something down. To give it, basically, you've shot it 24 frames a second, and in the editing room, you're like, shit, I think this should be slow-mo, but you haven't shot it in that fashion. So you need to invent frames, and there's a piece of software which recently has gathered some attention. It's labelled AI. It's not fucking AI. That's just a way of labelling it. But anyway, and there are some artifacts that happen when you use this, and it's all over this film. Like, I swear to God, they got a team of. But it looks like it's been done for a pint. You know what I mean? It's not well done at all. There's a.
What moment specifically? See if I can jog my memory.
When Lucilla, is it Lucia? Lucilla? Connie Nielsen's character, sorry, the names are quite forgettable in this film, but she's about to be, she's on that podium in this, and there's a moment between Mescal and her, and it's meant to be quite touching.
Before Denzel.
Before Denzel shoots her with an arrow.
Yeah.
Look at her hair. It goes slow motion, but like her hair kind of warps into place, and it's fucking annoying.
Wow, okay, right.
And it's weird to see it in a film that cost between $250 and $310 million because it looks like it's been done for a pint. Honestly,
wow.
I don't know.
Ridley Scott was too efficient.
Well, this is it. Like, he does bang them out quickly.
He's famed for his efficiency, isn't he?
Yeah. I just thought it was a bit lazy. In that respect.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't notice it, but then my eye isn't trained like yours for that. So
I wish it wasn't.
Maybe it's a bit of a
because I know exactly how they did it as well. I know what software they used. I know what button they went. I know what drop down menu it was.
It gives it like a real sort of like robotic feel.
It really threw me off.
I mean, I imagine great software in certain situations, right?
Yeah, if you do it well, like basically what you need to do is after you employ that, you need to clean it up frame by frame. It takes time and money, but it's a really good way of getting basically how editorial decision after the fact, a way of making it look good, and they just didn't do it. Yeah. I wanna clean those frames up. And I don't know. Nobody's gonna care, but I think maybe for the small faction of people that do know how to do that, like, it will be noticeable, and I think you can't ignore it.
No.
Yeah. It's fun. I feel like I've been quite cruel towards this film because, broadly speaking, I did sort of enjoy it. I thought it was at the very least sort of entertaining to a fault.
I think what I liked about it was how the actors worked with what minimal amount of emotional wallop there was. I thought all the acting was pretty good across the board. I thought Mescal more than earned his place as a blockbuster lead.
A lot of
quite strange. I think we said this earlier, but it's strange to see him in that way. I think
it is.
He's definitely an actor, I think, that works better on a sort of more subtextual level. I think.
Agreed. Yeah.
I think as a leading man, I think he was good. I think his ferocity really sold the performance. Yeah. I think in the quieter moments, I wasn't quite as sold.
No. Yeah.
But that's not. Again, I love the guy. After Sun. Yeah. Forever, baby. But yeah, I just had a bit of that. Yeah, I was a bit unsure. Denzel, weirdly, I thought the trailer marketed his performance to be weirder than it actually ended up being.
Yeah.
His performance isn't that weird. I think it's like a fairly sort of safe Denzel performance.
It's the Oliver Reed character, basically. It's the same character.
Yeah. Just with a bit more sort of, with a bit more Denzel.
Yeah. And
which was fine. I mean, it's fine.
I've heard people say it's amazing, and I thought it was good. I didn't think it was amazing. I thought there were moments of where genuine hilarity, where he says the word politics and then just goes politics. I don't know why. I just thought it was funny.
He's very out of place, but Denzel gets a free pass for that.
There is delight in watching people clearly have fun with a performance.
Yeah, he's chewing the fucking scene up, and
he works well with Ridley Scott. Like American Gangster is a great film.
Yeah,
a long film, but a very good one. And the two Emperors as well. Joseph Quinn, I'm actually not too sure of the other one.
They were pretty good.
They were very good at being hateable, and that is what you need with this kind of performance.
Well, they inherited that mantle very well, didn't they, from Joaquin Phoenix?
Yes. Yeah. I actually would have liked to have seen slightly more of them.
It was interesting because I felt that another one of the sort of... Yeah, that was one of the strengths of the film, but I think there was also a little bit of a weakness in the sense that, again, going back to Scarpa's script, I feel a bit bad, but, what I felt... It was this sort of very overt sort of parallels, or the very sort of overt criticisms of hyper-individualized sort of social Darwinism of the ideology of that period of Rome, which is the strong rule, the weak are destroyed, and the gladiatorial arena is the sort of perfect sort of visual metaphor for the way that Rome views sort of the power and how that shows itself in society. I thought it was a pretty thinly veiled nod to the sort of current situation.
Oh yeah, I got that
in the West. The sort of pervasive nature of this hyper-individualized sort of philosophy, and how it sort of is kind of pervasive and almost celebrated at the expense of crumbling state institutions and rising inequality and poorer living standards. I thought it was a very sort of thinly veiled criticism in the film.
There's a sort of Marie Antoinette type line, isn't there, where he goes, "Oh, they can eat war." And
yeah.
Like, oh, right, okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I know. And I think you're right in saying that in the first Gladiator, it was one of the weaker elements of the film. But that given the fact that there's not as much to work with in that department in terms of the emotional wallop, probably could have done with spending a bit more time on that.
I agree, yeah. I actually think one of the things that it could have improved on was because in Gladiator you get the feeling like Commodus is the character's name, the Emperor in the first one, played by Joaquin Phoenix. You get the feeling like it would be difficult to get an audience with him, but in this one it feels like you could just walk into their room and just have a conversation with them. I thought that maybe could have been handled a bit better, because I think with leaders you have to really kind of give off the impression that they're a kind of force to be reckoned with. You have to have them alone and with a secretary almost saying you can't come in, and I think a kind of level of security around them that just wasn't really there. I found it odd that they would just sort of hanging about with seemingly ordinary Romans. And that just wouldn't happen. But again, that's a minor criticism, maybe.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm? Yeah, I don't know.
No, I agree. Yeah, no, I do. Yeah, I agree that there's sort of you don't really get a sense of that kind of the power that they're sort of talking about in the film. You don't really get a sense of that.
Yeah,
and I guess maybe that's kind of to sort of suit that kind of the sort of notion that it's the people that hold the power.
Yeah,
yes, which is a theme that I think is kind of like follows the entire film and right up to Mescal's sort of like realization that he's going to have to be the one that's going to be instrumental in returning the power back to the people,
Yeah.
Turning Rome into this sort of kind of socialist utopia.
Yeah.
One of the key lines I seem to remember that really stuck with me is the bit where he's sort of saying about a safe space for everyone.
Yeah.
The Roman Empire obviously encompassed such a scope of people from all across the world.
Yeah, a very diverse place.
And I think that's interesting. Again, quite thinly veiled in the way, of course, we're sort of the powers that be encourage us to view the other. I think I don't know. I kind of valued Scarpa's intention.
Yeah.
And I think it was interesting to use Rome, as kind of like the dominant power of the time to reflect on the dominant power of now, obviously being United States.
Did a better job than Megalopolis did.
Right, okay.
Of doing basically the exact same thing.
And that's more focused on that, right? So it's interesting that a film primarily about a gladiator sort of does a better job.
Yeah. I think one of the final things I want to mention, which a lot of recent films and a lot of legacy sequels are guilty of, is the inclusion of text at the beginning, which entirely invalidates the power and prestige of the original film, because there are events that happen in Gladiator which are a very kind of tangible arc. Rome goes from being a dictatorship to a republic again. That is what happens, and Maximus is key in making that happen. But this film just undoes it like really, really quickly. So it is sort of a bit of a
retcon.
Yeah, but with text as well. Don't even give me a prologue, at least, man. If you're going to do a prologue, which this film actually does, and it's quite a nice painterly opening.
Yeah.
But at least just give me some storytelling, which isn't just something to read. And maybe I will be more on board with the fact that it's become a dictatorship again.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought it was lazy.
I completely agree, and it speaks to that sort of. I think we've said this before in our discussion about legacy sequels, but the sort of excitable and sort of the excitable nature when they want to rush to the sequel.
Yeah.
So it's like it's an awkward balance of like reminding the audience of why they've come to watch the film, but then almost immediately doing away with what makes the original film so important. It's such a bizarre sort of kind of like paradoxical thing, isn't it? Like it doesn't really make a great deal. Paradox is right, isn't it?
Yeah. No, completely. Yeah.
It kind of doesn't really make a great deal of sense.
Yeah.
To me, and that's kind of one of the inherent contradictions of the legacy sequel. And I think it was particularly bad here. I don't think a lot of the more recent ones have been as bad as this one.
It just threw the whole plot of the first film away, and it's like, no, back to the start again.
Yeah.
It made me glad that Denis Villeneuve directed Blade Runner 2049 and not Ridley Scott, because I really love 2049. I think it's fantastic, and I just think maybe in the hands of Scott it would have been a bit more guilty of things like that. He would have let that slip, whereas I don't think Villeneuve would have done.
What do you think it is that's driving Scott?
I don't know. Yeah,
because
he loves working, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's it. I think. Interestingly, I watched an interview with him, and he was saying that he talks about, someone asks him what kind of films he's watching at the moment, and he just says, well, lower budget films, because the more money that's involved, the shitter the film is. That was basically what he was saying.
Wow, okay, interesting.
And I thought, God, that's interesting.
Saying that.
Yeah, it's interesting you saying. Yeah. And again, like I know I've always said that I sort of prefer Tony Scott's body of work more broadly than Ridley's, but I do think he's still a fantastic filmmaker, and he's got some absolute belters. Obviously, he's got some of the most iconic sci-fi films of all time.
Yeah,
that's presence transcend genre. People look at those as just some of the best films. Canon.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me that he's kind of, with his work with Alien and with now with Gladiator, there's this sort of, I don't know, like, I don't know where is he steering his legacy of these films to? Like, I can't quite fathom it or work it out.
No, I don't know why. I think maybe he's just more than happy to revisit them. Maybe he clearly loves working. Like I said, like
God, the man's in his 80s. I mean, he is getting stuck in. And
I know, yeah.
And he's still doing a very admirable job. I mean, I wasn't sold on a lot of elements of this film, but you could tell it's made by someone that's passionate.
Yeah, and someone with a lot of experience as well.
Yeah, gotcha.
Because I think there's a lot to be said about well choreographed action sequences, and directing those must be a fucking nightmare. And he clearly just knows how to do it, and he clearly knows how to do it without even really putting much effort into it. Like, he's gone on record saying, like, making a film is actually easier than you might think, and which is a very Ridley Scott thing to say.
Yeah, definitely.
He's like, oh, fuck it, it's easy. You just do it, and you just tell people what to do, and that's what I do, and I love it. I think a lot of other directors might say the opposite and say, no, it's stressful, and to make a good film is hard. To make a great film is nearly impossible.
Yeah,
but he's in the other camp.
That arrogance is I kind of find it quite endearing with him. I don't know, it's interesting.
Oh yeah, he's a character, and I do like how much he doesn't care about any of this.
How people perceive him, yeah.
No,
he's not. I don't think he cares about how people perceive his films, which,
no,
you know, I think is interesting given that they tend to be quite weak.
Yeah, especially more recently.
I just wonder what it is that he's sort of doing. Is it that he can't stand the idea of anyone else having a pop at it? Whilst he's got the sort of energy to do it, why would he not do it?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's sort of like he has kind of contractual power over them. I don't know. I mean, he's got
a production company, so Scott Free, yeah. But largely, I only see their logo in front of films he's directed, so I don't.
Yeah.
I can't imagine he has a financial obligation that he needs to meet with that company. So the man's motivations are kind of a mystery to me as well. But I'm sure he has his reasons. Ridley, if you
another classic.
Yeah.
And I guess for him, I think if you even think about the original Gladiator, he's not particularly interested in history there, is he really?
No.
So I think that's always been his style, and I think I don't think it's obviously not his belief to like go into a film thinking this will shit over the legacy of the first one I made. You know, I think obviously he wants these films to be viewed positively. You know, who wouldn't? But yeah, I just find it interesting that he's in this sort of territory of his career at this sort of late stage, making these kinds of films.
He doesn't care about his... I mean, like, if you care about historical accuracy, the set design is all wrong. Like, Rome didn't look like that. Of course it didn't. All the statues are bright white marble. They're actually painted in, like... They're painted in colours. And Rome probably looked quite modern, even by our standards, but, like, all the walls are tatty. It's like you're walking... It's like a tourist's...
approximation?
It's a tourist approximation of what you think history is like. Like, you walk down the streets of Pompeii, you think Pompeii looked like that. And you think, you think all the paintings are forever faded. But they weren't. They were bright and colourful, so... But Scott understands that. He understands that people have a perception of history, and he's pandering to that perception. He's not really... It's like making Gravity for astronauts. You're not going to do it.
No.
Yeah. But there you go.
Yeah, I guess to sort of like completely surrender yourself to history is to have a direct impact on the kind of fundamental building blocks of Hollywood storytelling.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
That's something that's just not going to happen.
No, especially
I would love to see like a sort of like, a historically accurate film about ancient Rome, but if that's going to happen, the budget's going to be slashed and it's probably going to be very small scale.
Yeah, a couple of rooms.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to be like it's not going to be like battle sequences and stuff, because Hollywood,
it's going to be
maybe they should shoulder some of the blame for this, but an historically accurate epic isn't going to sell.
No, God. No.
Should we do outro?
Let's outro.
Questing the cinematic void.
There we have it then.
Indeedy.
Yeah. Gladiator 2. Love talking about that.
Yeah, it was good.
Nice to
talk about it. It's funny, thinking back to it, to the discussion we had about 5 minutes ago. Maybe I was a bit harsh on it, but I
There's a lot to love about it on surface level, really. It is entertaining.
Surface level, yeah. Go deeper and
you're on shaky ground. I liked the afterlife bits. They were kind of cool looking. But yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was somewhat entertained.
Yes. Are you not entertained is the question posed by the first film. Answered now by you.
Exactly. Next week,
Conclave.
We're sort of pulling a film out of our arse there.
Yeah,
it's a bit slow.
It's
period.
odd. Yeah, considering it's sort of awards season. I mean, there were
gearing up for the new year, though. The new year release is a big one. So.
Yeah, there's a few films that I'd like to see, but their release strategy's difficult in that they only seem to be playing in the middle of the day on a weekday.
Yeah,
where everyone's working. It's like really hard to watch these films.
Yeah,
which is a shame because there's a lot which is just difficult to watch. I mean, it took me ages to watch Anora.
It's hard to. And of course, everyone else is in the same boat, which means it's harder to actually see the films because everyone else is, booking ahead and stuff. But we'll give it a go.
Yeah,
a papal drama.
Yeah.
So I guess that gives us an opportunity to talk about the relationship between religion and film.
Yeah, specifically Catholicism.
Right?
I
think it'd be good to sort of narrow the focus slightly. You mentioned Scorsese in the interim.
Yeah, Scorsese,
Abel Ferrara.
Yeah,
there's and then more sort of direct films like The Two Popes or Spotlight.
I love Spotlight. So
lots of scope there to discuss the sort of iconography, the sort of power it holds over people for positive and for negative, I guess.
Yeah. Angels and Demons.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
That whole trilogy is interesting. I mean, pretty naff, but interesting.
I don't think I've maybe seen the first one. But
the third one is really bad. Inferno. That is a bad movie. I love the second one, though. I think the second one's great. There's a bit in it with a helicopter that I love. But anyway. Yeah.
Well, that and more to come.
Yes.
In the meantime, thank you very much for getting to the end of yet another Cineboys to Cinemen episode.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll catch you in the next one.
See you then.
Take care. See you later.
Bye.